It's time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are Craig Hope from The Mail and The Guardian's Paul McInnes. Hi guys, welcome to you both. Before we chat to you, let's run through the back pages that we have late night in the Champions League. So just a couple so far, including this in the Telegraph. Liverpool's emphatic return to form features heavily in the papers, including on the front of the Telegraph sports section. What crisis is the headline in The Guardian, as they also report on Liverpool's demolition of Frankfurt. Plus, after La Liga's Miami game was called off on Tuesday, could the same fate be suffered for Perth's Serie A match? Let's start with you, Craig, and the Telegraph, and of course lots of papers talking about Liverpool's return to form. What did you make of it? Because obviously it started in difficult fashion, didn't it? But I imagine Arne Slot will be very pleased with that response.
He will be very pleased, and so he should be. They did what they could, and I noticed a lot of the headlines screaming, back at us, Liverpool are back. They stopped the rot, but so they should at Eintracht Frankfurt. And I'll equate this to the logic I applied to the game I was at last night. That was Newcastle beating Benfica 3-0. Premier League teams are good. They should be beating Benfica. They should be beating Eintracht Frankfurt. Chelsea tonight should be beating Ajax, who are the worst team in the competition. And Jose Mourinho got it spot on last night when he said that his team were able to compete for the best part of 45 minutes, a little over half time there. Then the physical superiority of the Premier League teams, coupled with that technical excellence that is bigger, they're better, they're faster, they're stronger. And we saw that with Liverpool tonight. So while they did what they could, and there were lots of promising individual performances, there were one or two who I would be concerned with, by the way, none more so than Alexander Isak. But when you look at what Florian Wirtz did, Dominic Szoboszlai, can it be good for confidence? Yes, absolutely. But I wouldn't be sat here now declaring that Liverpool are back, because Premier League teams should be beaten. What are Frankfurt now? 7th, 8th in the Bundesliga? You look at the 6 English Premier League teams now, they're in the top 15, 16 teams of the Champions League. They should all go through as an absolute minimum to the expanded knockout phase of the Champions League, if not further. So yes, good performance, plenty to be cheered about. Arne Slot will be happy, but no, I wouldn't declare it Liverpool back. Absolutely not yet.
So Craig isn't quite convinced, and Paul, Craig points to the opposition Liverpool faced in the Champions League in Frankfurt. In terms of the Telegraph's take on this, their headline, Slot stops the rot, and then they go on to say Liverpool get their swagger back. Is that too strong a line there, getting their swagger back, Paul?
I think you have to accept what Craig is saying as being correct. You know, expectations should be high for Premier League teams. But Craig also makes the point, it's the psychological aspect of football is very important at whatever level you're playing. And I think Liverpool needed this win to remind themselves that they can play like that, because they haven't really so far this season. The underlying stats in the Manchester United game weren't as bad as the result. And this was a performance in which everything sort of clicked. But more importantly, I think everybody looked like they understood where they needed to be on the field. Florian Wirtz, 2 assists, the last 2 assists in the game, from a right-hand side position where he's playing right on a 4-4-2. And he was drifting inside. He was interacting with both the forwards and the midfield, finding that space. And playing a lot of passes that were playing people in. So I think from that sort of thing, they will really take a boost from this, a psychological good news factor. I think there was a real kind of it was really noticeable actually when Liverpool got their equaliser that the mood changed, and I think that was because it was a really great crafted goal in and of itself. It had Andy Robertson involved, who's been out of the picture a bit, and I think having him back in the team was actually a boost for Liverpool tonight. But he found Hugo Ekitike with a pass that crossed the entire half of the pitch. But Ekitike had read what Robertson was going to do about 2 or 3 seconds before he did it, and then romped away from the defenders, cut inside, begging them to challenge. You know, would have been a red card and all that sort of thing, and then finished coolly under the keeper. It was just executed with aplomb all the way through the field, and you could see the sort of pressure lift off Liverpool after that. And I think they will take a lot from this, but I think there are questions for Liverpool at the weekend against Brentford as to what team they go with, because I think at some point you're going to expect that Slot begins to settle a bit more on who his first choice 11 is.
Your paper, Paul, also cover this one, The Guardian, what crisis Liverpool end losing run in emphatic style. They mentioned the word crisis in the headline. Craig, it wasn't all good news for Liverpool, was it, against Frankfurt? Because Alexander Isak was taken off at half-time. Clinton Morrison, who was watching the game on Soccer Special, said he had a quiet match. How worried should Liverpool and perhaps Arne Slot be about Isak's early form in his Liverpool career?
Yeah, I would say very worried. And I'm a reporter who knows him very well, having covered him for the best part of 3 years up here at Newcastle. And I'll just take you inside an idea and a story, a feature we wrote in the weekend at the Daily Mail. Now I'd flagged this idea during the international break that I wanted to spend a little bit of time, watching Alexander Isak go on his trail and answer the question, what is up with Isak? Well, my desk down in London wanted me to deliver this piece for Saturday, which I duly did too, and that was because of the fear that Isak might explode against Manchester United on Sunday and score a hat-trick. And I said, listen, guys, he won't do. I've watched him for long enough now. This isn't just a case of fitness. It can't be. Arne Slot declared on Friday Isak was 100% fit, and now is the time to judge him. But he hasn't played well since February. That's what folk are forgetting here. From January onwards, there was that mindset almost of this long, painful goodbye and extraction from Newcastle. Because of that, he's lost his belief, he's lost his rhythm, he's lost his instinct. And the player you saw there tonight was unrecognisable from his very best. I think he had only 3 touches in the penalty area. He wasn't really running. He wasn't committing men like he can do. He's quite an extraordinary player when you see him at his best. He's almost double jointed the way his feet work, the way he can manoeuvre situations. We haven't saw that yet for Liverpool. I thought it was a tremendous show of faith after the performance he produced on Sunday during the defeat by Manchester United, to put him in again from the start. It's almost like the playing him just hoping something will happen, more in hope than expectation or belief. Now I would honestly take him out of the side, and by extension, Mo Salah is a problem as well. Those two players, we all thought, wow, Liverpool have got Alexander Isak and Mo Salah in the side this season. They're going to, they won the league by 5 or 6 points last year, put another 10 on that this season. It doesn't quite work like that. They aren't clicking as a pair, and they aren't playing well individually. Salah walked straight down the tunnel on full time there. By all accounts, he was in a little bit of a strop. When they come to play Brentford on Saturday, which will be an infinitely harder game than they've had in Germany tonight, if I was Arne Slot, I wouldn't play Isak or Salah. Neither seems in a particularly good place right now. And to answer your question, yes, I would be worried about Alexander Isak. It's about more than fitness. He has lost something for the nature of his exit from Newcastle.
So Craig is making some big calls if he was to be the Liverpool manager for the weekend. Paul, I want to turn to you and The Sun. Their headline there touches on some of the stuff that Craig was talking about there with Ekitike's good form, but Isak's early struggles. Hugo bosses it to halt horror run. Do you think a big decision has to be made by Slot now, Paul, in terms of going with Ekitike, going with the 4-man, and perhaps giving Isak a spell on the bench despite that big money price tag he came in the summer with?
Yeah, I think he does. I mean, this is a long season. Liverpool are quite likely to be playing 60 games over the course of it. And there will be a moment and time for everybody to get their minutes, and moments where Slot and the team rely on these players. It's about how you bring them on and bring them into the fold and help them to sort of pick up what it is the coach wants to do and how they interact with their teammates. I think it's very interesting what Craig says about this being sort of the vestiges of the long goodbye for Isak. And clearly Ekitike has come from Frankfurt desperate to make his mark as a Liverpool player. And that's the difference between these two players at this point in time. I think it should also be acknowledged that Federico Chiesa came on at half-time for Isak, and he is working his way ever further into Slot's plans after his assist at the weekend. And he is a player who appears committed, desperate to impress. And I think that's what maybe what you might need to see a bit more from Isak. But listen, I don't think any final judgment is going to be made on any of these players right now. And certainly it would be foolish if anybody were to do so. I think it's going to be a case of bringing each of these players on and trying to get them into form. And I think my opinion is, I think Salah has played too much football over the past year. He was I think ever present pretty much for Liverpool last season. Their go-to man, the man they relied upon to win them the title effectively, alongside Van Dijk at the back. So I think he might have, at his age, I think that might be something he's still feeling. And I think to dip him out of the side for a little bit wouldn't necessarily hurt.
Be interesting to see the decision Slot makes at the weekend for Liverpool's next match. Let's stay with the Sun, turn our attention to Chelsea now. The headline there, Enzo's youngsters break Champs League record, referring to 3 teenagers for Chelsea scoring in the same game. First time that's happened in the Champions League. So based on that, Craig, the future is bright for Chelsea.
Yeah, it is, and they've been threatening to do this for a while now. They've been stockpiling all these wonderful teenagers from all over the world. But this crop now, they do look very exciting. I think they've won 4 on the spin now. To go back to the point I made at the top of the show, they should be beating Ajax. Ajax are statistically the worst team in the competition this year. I think the bottom, and allied to that, they had a man sent off after 15 minutes. They should probably be scoring more goals than they did. But things just are starting to look as if they are clicking at Chelsea. I know it was only a victory against Nottingham Forest on Saturday, but I thought they did it well. They've got that garnish of the younger players, especially in those wide areas. But when you look at the base and you look at players like Reece James, and I know that Maresca did rotate there tonight, that spine through the middle there, the centre backs with Enzo and Caicedo now forming one of the best central midfield partnerships in the league. I think there's every reason, if you're a follower of Chelsea, to be optimistic. And games like tonight, absolutely. I think Paul made the point. While I do down sometimes the merits of these Champions League victories, and I'm not a massive fan of this format in terms of the expanded 24 teams going through. I think I've spoke about it on this show before. There is no jeopardy, but you can only do what you do. And will players like Szoboszlai and Wirtz, players like last night for Newcastle, the likes of Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, rediscover that confidence, that touch? Absolutely. So this is no bad thing for Chelsea tonight. Tottenham, by contrast, they've had to work a little bit harder for their result tonight, but all around it was a good night for those Premier League teams.
Let's continue our chat about English teams in the Champions League and turn to you, Paul, and talk about Tottenham. They keep their unbeaten away record so far this season intact, but was that one of the few positives they can take from that goalless draw at Monaco?
I think the biggest positive anybody will be able to take from that match is if they're able to wipe it from their memories imminently. And it was incredibly dreary affair, and Tottenham across the field looked without a spark of invention, ideas, bravery, just desire. In fact, the tempo was so slow. It felt a world away from a Premier League match. You look on. You don't have to go for long looking on social media to see people who were ecstatic about the appointment of Thomas Frank just a couple of months ago. Now, bringing back memories of the Nuno era and saying that Espirito Santo was sacked for less than what has happened what's been achieved on the field by Frank's Spurs. I'm still of the mind that this Spurs team can benefit, or the Spurs identity in general can benefit from being more robust, more resilient. And again, they've gone away like a Bodo Glimt. They've gone away. They've not played well. They've been outplayed, admittedly, by a much weaker, a reputationally weaker team, but they've kept a point. And I think there is something in that. And I think if Spurs can be a bit more obdurate, more consistently, that will be good for them. But Spurs fans and Spurs in general, they want the glory game. They're not going to sit there and endure a year of softball without complaint. So I think a match like this was probably not good for Thomas Frank, and not good for a number of his players, because, like I say, they look blunt. I think Wilson Odobert was in and out of the game, showed flashes, but could have had a quiet match. There was nothing from Richarlison. Xavi Simons came on, got about 5 minutes in his preferred number 10 role, then had to shift out left when Odobert went off injured, and it didn't do anything in the game. We saw a little bit of Randall Kolo Muani, which was maybe actually offered some of the most hopeful signs in the game. But again, it was more about his commitment and willingness to get around the pitch than any kind of flair or attacking threat that he showed. So I think Spurs have a lot of work to do in the attacking third of the pitch. Fortunate thing is, they're still well placed in the Premier League. They're reasonably well placed in the Champions League. It's not panic stations, but there is work that needs to be done for sure.
Paul, Craig, thanks very much for now. Back with you shortly because we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll look at more of these sports stories in the morning's papers, including this in the Times. Dyche's snood and hat ban, that after he was appointed the new Nottingham Forest boss. Paul McInnes. Paul, we're going to start with you on our second half and talk about Sean Dyche. A headline here, back of the Times, Dyche's snood and hat ban. And just having a quick glance at this, it feels like a real Sean Dyche kind of story as he looks to maybe instill a bit of discipline at the training ground, perhaps.
Yeah, well, it makes a change from banning ketchup, I suppose, which is the usual signifier of a change in regime. I've got a soft spot for Sean Dyche. I'm glad he's back in the Premier League. I think we forget quite quickly how actually he's an intelligent man, he's a witty man, and he knows how to play the media. And I think that might not be a bad thing for him at Nottingham Forest, because my suspicion is that Evangelos Marinakis likes a bit of showbiz in and around this club and likes the attention of the media to be on him. And so, getting rid of snoods, probably not even being worn quite yet, I imagine. But and it sends out a signal. He wants his players to be tough. But I think what was interesting in his remarks more broadly was that he was trying to let the players know that he was on their side, that he identified with them, and that I think the idea that they would be happy to give up their snoods is probably a good one. And he was saying that the players were very proud of what they achieved under last season under Nuno, and not just their league finish. I don't think he was talking about the way in which they played, that they were robust, that they were hard to beat, that they liked to fight, that they battled their way to victories. And Dyche was trying to say to them, listen, we want that again, where you don't have to worry. Murillo and Milinkovic don't have to worry about a high line and getting caught for pace anymore. We're gonna reset. We're gonna be more closer to where we were last season. But he was also giving a little message that we're going to try and build on that. So he's not just saying, we're going to regress, we're going to build. He also really enjoyed going on at length about the return of more direct football to the Premier League. He was bringing out the distinction between what's a long pass and a long ball, and that he might have been branded a long ball merchant, whereas everybody's making long passes nowadays. But Sean Dyche knows the power of a long throw. He knows the power of direct play. He can also mix it up, and he can include more cultured players and get the best out of those as well. I'm sure Morgan Gibbs-White will remain central to the way this Forest team play. But it was a jovial, it was light, it was an upbeat introduction, and I think that's kind of sensible because we're not too far into the season. Things aren't over, things aren't desperate yet, but Forest do need to get rolling. And that's where Dyche comes in.
Let's go to the Mirror and speak about Sandro Tonali, Craig, someone you've been writing about as well. The headline here, Tonali's new Toon deal during ban, so signing a contract extension with Newcastle during his betting ban. And as I say, you've been writing about this story as well.
Yeah, it was a story we broke earlier today. Newcastle do love a secret contract extension. They keep us journalists on our toes, they really do. And this one was signed 18 months ago. Now, it came during the 8-month betting ban, which of course arrived only a few months into Sandro Tonali's time at St James's Park. And it's been described as a show of faith and trust on both sides. Now, the assumption was that Sandro Tonali's contract expired in 2028. The actual reality is it was extended to 2029 with an option in the favour of the club. So in effect, he is tied to Newcastle to 2030. Does that mean Sandro Tonali will be a Newcastle player to 2030? No, it doesn't. It never does. But what it does, it affords the club more security, because Sandro Tonali undoubtedly will be, I think, next summer one of the most sought-after players in world football. He really is. He is sensational. I call him Newcastle's gladiator. He's both their sword and their shield. And since he came back from that ban for illegal gambling, he's been Newcastle's best player. He's the overriding reason behind them returning to the Champions League, ending that 70-year wait for a domestic trophy. So this now just gives them that little bit of security. What they will actually want to do is to reward him with a new deal on top of that, more money, which does negate any talk of him leaving, January next summer, the summer beyond that. But this is good news for Newcastle. It's good news for supporters who were starting to get a little bit nervous because Sandro Tonali is their best player.
Craig, I want to stay with you and stick with your paper, The Mail, and talk about the former Leeds owner Andrea Rattrizzani, who's been denied his return to Leeds, says the headline. Just talk us through this story.
I really had to smile. My colleague Adam Patel did really well to get an exclusive interview with Rattrizzani a couple of weeks back, in which he revealed he was looking forward to coming back to Elland Road this weekend. Well, the powers that be at Elland Road took exception to Rattrizzani making public his invite, and they've subsequently banned him and withdrawn it for the game this weekend, which I think is ludicrous. Listen, I'm no big fan of Rattrizzani. I covered Leeds quite closely during that period, but I think in this instance, he's given an interview where he's been entertaining, he's been honest, and I do think this is really, really petty on behalf of Leeds and doesn't reflect well on them at all. Just let him in.
Just let him in, says Craig. Paul, going to come to you. I think we've got time to fit this in. Maybe you've got a minute and a half for you to talk about Milan's Serie A game in Perth could be called off, and it falls hot on the heels of La Liga's efforts to take Barcelona's game against Villarreal to Miami. Is this just a concept that isn't going to work, taking domestic games abroad?
It does have that feel about it now, yes. I think you could tell, particularly from the tone of La Liga's communications and Javier Tebas's personal remarks, and you wonder perhaps the two are interchangeable. But there was a real kind of bitterness about the way it unravelled, and a sense that Spanish football, La Liga, had been hung out to dry and was being denied its opportunities to grow and compete with the big boys of the Premier League and the Champions League. But what's interesting about the Serie A game, which is AC Milan scheduled to play Como in Perth, Australia in February, and that's still waiting a number of approvals, particularly from the regional confederation, the AFC, that the game can go ahead. What's interesting about this is that nobody's said anything on the record. There's been no kind of disquiet in Italy as yet about it. But what appears to be going on behind the scenes, particularly from UEFA, are suggestions that, not only should Serie A fall into line with La Liga, but it's almost inevitable that it will. And I think that suggests that there might have been a change in attitude towards from FIFA as well. Now, FIFA were involved in legal dispute with the promoters relevant, who are behind the La Liga Miami fixture idea, over the scheduling of matches abroad, and it was a legal dispute that they lost. And so there was a sort of sense that maybe FIFA were now going to be at least, if not open to it, that sort of thing, at least accommodate it. But I think the vibe very much now is that the old world of football is coming back together again, and this might yet
coming back together.
stopped.
And Paul, Craig, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your company. Catch up at hour, and where you get your podcast from as well. We're back tomorrow night too, and coming up in the next hour, we will have details on big wins for Chelsea and Liverpool.